one object out there that we have lots of questions about is Pluto. And Pluto is the little guy that everyone likes in the solar system. So the idea that astronomers have agreed on what a planet is and Pluto isn't included is still something that people are talking about and will be talking about for some time. So we have this book, What About Pluto? And there are lots of pictures of Pluto that artists have drawn for us that show its rugged surface and its colors, but those are just ideas. We wanted to show that Pluto is still a world we don't know a whole lot about. So our picture of Pluto, this little speck here, is really about what we know about its surface. It's got some brighter parts and some darker parts. Spacecraft are going to answer some of the questions about what those are, but it hasn't happened yet. And we also use Pluto to help us think about everything else in the solar system. So what about Pluto? How is it like Earth? Well, Earth is small and rocky compared to some other planets. Pluto is small and rocky. No, but if you brought Pluto close to the sun, its surface would start evaporating. Earth, luckily, has a lot of solid rock that doesn't evaporate. So how is Pluto like Jupiter? Well, Jupiter is farther from the sun than Earth, and Pluto, of course, is very far from the sun. How is Pluto like comets? The composition of Pluto is probably a lot like comets. How is Pluto like asteroids? Asteroids tend to orbit in belts with other asteroids, and Pluto orbits in a region with other things that are like Pluto. So what about Pluto really opens up a lot of comparing and contrasting, categorizing ideas about what's in the solar system, what's alike, what's different.
And what the great thing about this book is that, as John mentioned, there's a lot of comparisons. So you can use this as a resource for helping students learn to compare different objects, learn to use comparative language such as big, bigger, biggest, and further, furthest. It's a really great resource in that way as well.
And it also, I think, is a really neat book because so many kids are interested in Pluto and wish that Pluto were still a planet, and sort of this book gives them more things to talk about around that than just sort of feeling sorry for Pluto because Pluto's small. They have evidence that they can point to and say, well, really, I think Pluto should be considered a planet because, and they can talk about all the reasons that they think it should be, or they can decide that they don't think that it should be.
And it actually sparks a lot of really interesting conversations in the classroom, and several classrooms that I've observed that are using that have kids reading this book. It sparks a lot of really lively discussions. And I've heard kids say things like, well, no, but there isn't evidence that it's a planet because look, its composition is different and it's much smaller. And it really does start to, I think you mentioned, start to give them some of that evidence about why this reclassification of Pluto happened. It wasn't just, someone decided they didn't like Pluto anymore. There was evidence that it didn't really fit in the category that we had given it because now we know more about what's out there than we did even 10, 15 years ago. So it's not only a really great example of comparing different things in the solar system, but it gives it models for kids, sort of how science works. When we find new evidence, sometimes you have to revise your thinking. We teach students to do that as well.